we just go like that. So here in this representation, AU infinity for drug product A is equal to the AU infinity value for drug product B. So the extent of absorption, this is by way of review, the extent of absorption for A and B is the same, but I think I remember you telling me, I don't like that little hump that I got in B. That's not by design. That's my coffee hasn't kicked in yet. Okay. So they have the same extent of absorption in that if the dose is the same amount of reaching the systemic circulation, and therefore the same amount of being excreted in urine. But I think you told me which one of these is absorbed faster as far as rate. A, right, because it reaches its final value faster. Very good. Now let me throw this at you, just for chuckles. Let's say if for chuckles, yeah. Let's just say if I'm looking at plasma data and see how good you are. And let's say that I was looking at concentration versus time, plasma data. Because, I mean, this is urinary excretion data, but it had to be in the bloodstream or plasma at some time, okay? So let's say I got two curves. And I go with one other way. Let's go this way. So we can differentiate. So I'm gonna call the one I'm putting these dark circles on. So I got the circle curve, the dark circles or the dots, circle curve, and I got the line curve. Circle versus line. I don't want to label them A and B. That's what you're going to tell me. So let's say that one of these curves is associated with drug product A over here, and one of them is associated with drug product B. So this is plasma data. This is urinary excretion. This is what we see in the plasma. You know, this is one compartment model of absorption. You know how to strip the curve and do all that fancy stuff. Which one of these curves is associated with drug product A? The circle or the line, the dark line curve? With drug product, which one? Multiple choice question now. Which one is associated with drug product? Did I say A or B? A. Which one of these is associated with drug product A?
The line.
Line by show of hands. Line by show. What about the dark circles? The dots.
That's B.
Okay, very good. Now I'm just putting two, but I could have put three products up there. We can reconcile that because when we talked about plasma data at our last meeting, the line is reaching its Tmax value faster, so that kind of like coincides with what's happening in the urine. It's peaking out fast as far as the AU infinity value. Okay. The circle, okay, is reaching its AU infinity value slower, so therefore it has a longer Tmax value also. Okay, very good. I saw most of the hands go up in a positive manner. That's very good. Okay, so next week in laboratory, I'm trying to decide because I looked at the lecture outline and I skipped over urinary excretion, not intentionally, you know, to come to bioavailability. So next week in laboratory, you won't have a pre-assigned for laboratory, but next week in laboratory, I think we can spend some time talking about the kinetics of urinary excretion. Okay, for laboratory next week. So I'll show you the equation, show you how they come from, that describe these types of curves, and then there are no good problems in the textbook for urinary excretion. So we'll make up our own problem in laboratory. I'm going to let you help me make the problem. It's called simulation. So we're going to take the equation, we're going to generate some fake data, and then we're going to analyze. We're going to do a sigma minus plot like we talked about for the IV bolus stuff, but we didn't really do any IV bolus problems, but we talked about the kinetics. Here, we're going to not just talk about kinetics, we're going to take the equations and do some graphing and work a problem for urinary excretion. That's next week in laboratory, okay? So we can cover that portion of the lecture outline as well. Okay, question so far? I just looked at it this morning. Is this 16?
For urinary drug excretion?
No, for bioavailability. For bioavailability.
If you want to read up on drug use.
I'll have to check that. I'll have to check to see. It should be in the chapter. The aspect of it that I'm going to cover, it should be in the same chapter as the 1 component model on absorption.
Chapter 8.
It should be, but I'm going to look and confirm that, okay? Remember our 1 component model for absorption? We had this. Come on, Mark, don't fail me now. F times D, and we had A is equal to C times D, and then we had a route for metabolism. We had KEL route, and we had urinary excretion over here by KE. Okay, we just didn't cover this component. So that's what you follow on. So I'm saying that for this same model that we've already covered, we know all about plasma gathering. I'm saying next to the laboratory, this curve here corresponds to what's happening over here. So that's why I'm guessing it's probably in that same chapter. But I'll look and confirm that, okay? So ask me again, we can look right, well, you all got class after this anyway. But just ask me again on Friday and I'll look. But I'm pretty sure if the book has urinary excretion, it's probably in that same chapter. I'll look and see. Okay, so any questions so far? So cumulative urinary excretion, the graph would look like this if I look at the amount of drug in the urine as a function of time. Now, there's another way of looking at urinary excretion. We're just gonna only do one time in the lab next week. But we could also, and I don't know if the book covered this either, but we could look at urinary excretion rates. Urinary drug excretion rates. So the rate now, remember, is a speed, how fast something is happening. This is amount of drug in the urine. Urinary excretion rates. So the rate might be in terms of milligrams per hour, milligrams per minute, where AU value would just be in, say, milligrams, amount values. This is a speed, okay? So we looked at the rate versus time. Believe it or not, it's kind of interesting that we get a curve that looks just like this. It looks like the plasma concentration time curve. If we looked at urinary excretion rates, the rate that the drug is being excreted in the urine. I used to teach both methods. I used to teach urinary excretion rate and the cumulative, this method. So we're going to just be focusing on this method in the lab next week, okay? So I'm going to have to lecture a little bit in the lab, maybe for 30 minutes, and then we're going to create a problem to work on. Bring some graph paper, 2 cycle and 3 cycle, okay? Because we're going to be graphing some data. We're not going to actually do math associated with this, but I want you to know that this way of treating the data also exists, where instead of looking at the amount of drug in the urine, we can look at how fast the drug is coming out of the urine, and we can do this curve just like we did the plasma concentration time curve. We could draw the back extrapolated line and feather the curve and get that. The slope of this line is usually going to be negative Ka. The slope of this line is usually going to be negative Kel. To me, that's kind of fascinating in that we can look at drug excretion in the urine and get an estimate of Ka value and Kel value. So we'll talk more about that next week in the laboratory using this type of data. But I want you to know that this exists also. Question on this. You say, well, why do I want to know that? Remember, bioavailability is a measurement of the rate and extent of drugs that reach the systemic circulation. So we know Ka and Kel, just like we do with the plasma data, we can estimate. As a matter of fact, this peak right here, of course, that wouldn't be Cmax because this is urinary excretion data. But that time down here should be very close to Tmax. Just like this time down here is very close to Tmax. Now, we've already talked about in class or laboratory or whatever. Yeah, this is going to be close, but if we want a more definitive Tmax, we're going to put it in that equation. So we got Ka and Kel from this urinary excretion data. We could calculate what the expected Tmax would be in the plasma without even looking at the plasma data. Just by getting Ka and Kel from this urinary excretion type data. Again, we're not going to analyze this type of curve, but when we do this and convert it to a sigma minus plot and get a straight line, we're going to also be able to get the Ka and the Kel value and estimate, okay, the T-max value. But I'm glad that you recognize, even with just this type of curve, that drug product A is being absorbed faster than drug product B. And therefore, drug product A peaks out with its AU infinity value faster than drug product B. So we know then that drug product A ought to have a shorter T-max value than drug product B. Just look at the urinary excretion now. It ought to have a shorter T-max value. Okay. What about the KEL values? Based on what I've told you, yeah, they probably gonna be the same. It's the same drug, just different drug product. Very
How
good.
do you define KA?
Huh?
How do you define
We're gonna do that. We're gonna explore that in the laboratory next week. You talking for this? Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna lecture. I'm gonna give you the equations. We're gonna rearrange them to a linear form. We're gonna do what's called a simulation. We're gonna simulate some data like I do for your exams sometimes. In other words, if we're looking at a one compartment model, okay, here's final exam time. Okay, I wanna give you an IV bolus dose one compartment model. I wanna give you some data that you got to graph or whatever, or interpret. Okay, all I'll do is just, I can make up some data. I can say, okay, I'm gonna let KEL be equal to 0.15 reciprocal hours. K times T. I'm gonna let C0 be equal to 10 milligrams per liter in my equation. Now I can choose, y'all writing this down. I can choose a second time, so I can create data. That's called simulating, or simulation. In other words, we're taking the equation, we're choosing some values, and we're creating, just like you did in school with X, Y data.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I get a lot of your data from. So in laboratory and that's where a lot of the data in the textbook comes from. It ain't, most of that data, and when you're looking at those tables, most of that is just been simulated. It's not real data, but it still is good for teaching purposes. So next week in laboratory, we're gonna take the equation that applies to this, linearized equation, so you can see it's in the form of y equals mx plus b, and then we're gonna do a simulation based on the equation that describes that line. We're gonna create some data. The good thing is, when I create my simulated data, let's say this is the case, concentration versus time, and I get this, and then I draw my best fit line through the data, bang, I should get back my 0.15, you follow what I'm saying? So I can pretend like I don't know what KEL is. So now your job is calculate the KEL value. Well, I already know what it is. I created it from the jump street, okay? But all you see is a set of data with concentrations and times on the test or in real life or whatever. Now I say calculate the half-life of the KEL value. Now you got to graph that or whatever, but you should get back to 0.15 reciprocal hours as the KEL value, or something very close to that, within the 2%. C0, that C0 should come out very close to what I said it is, 10 milligrams per liter. Okay, that's the way, the game is played. So a lot of times when you're looking at a current exam, we haven't really done any graphing on the exams, but we've done some in laboratory, and a lot of the problems in your book. Now, the real data in your book, it'll say, it'll give the references and everything, if it's real data, but most of the data in the book has been based on the equation that describes the model. That's called simulating or doing a simulation. That's what we're gonna do next week for urinary excretion data. At least that's my plan for next week. Any other questions? Don't be shy, step right up. All right, let me see if there's anything else I want to say about urinary excretion. Now I did tell you that in my opinion, so we're gonna go with my opinion here. I don't know if the book says anything different, but this plasma data is, if you got a choice between plasma data and urinary excretion data to assess, bioavailability or whatever the case may be, yeah, this is the way to go. The plasma data. But urinary excretion is a close second. But certainly the use of plasma data to assess bioavailability is more commonly used. But again, like I said, sometimes we might not have a way of measuring drug concentrations in the plasma, but we might be able to easily measure drug concentration in the urine because of the concentration effect, that glomerular filtration and reabsorption of water in the tubules or whatever. So that tends to concentrate the drug in the urine. If the drug is concentrated in the urine, then it's easier, I shouldn't say it's easier, it's oftentimes easier to detect. And the reason I'm qualifying that statement, and I don't know if I've ever told you this before, but when they're looking for drug in the urine, like in athletes and stuff like that, these guys are I don't want to indict Usain Bolt because I love Usain Bolt. I mean I know he's retired now, but a lot of these athletes, and I'm just pulling that name out of the sky. But a lot of these athletes are doping. Okay, I'm saying they're using illegal substances, whatever it is. I'm just saying I don't know that, but I've never even heard that before. I just pulled his name out of the sky. Okay, I just pulled his name out of the sky. Okay, so don't go, because that might be somebody's cousin or something in here. So the fellow say, no, I'm just using it as an example. Okay, but there are athletes that are using illegal substances, and oftentimes look at the confirmed one, the bicycle ride, Armstrong. Went all those tours and whatever. Then after they find. Well, here's my point. Here's my main point: is that a lot of these athletes are tested, and they might be tested by taking a blood sample, but oftentimes it's a urine sample. Oftentimes, for some drugs, for some illegal substances, it's a urine sample. Okay. And the trainers and some of the doctors and stuff for these high-paid professional, so-called amateur athletes or whatever the case may be, they know sometimes that they can give another substance along with the banned substance, but something that is legal. Okay, it might not even be a drug, it could be a supplement, a nutritional supplement or something. And it will mask, in other words, hide the banned substance in the urine.
How they do that?
That's the point. Remember, everything is concentrated in the urine, right? So if I know, so let's just say for the sake of discussion. I don't know if in chemistry or whatever, do y'all still do, when you were in undergraduate school in the laboratory, do y'all still do like paper chromatography or whatever the case may be?
No.
You know, thin layer chromatography, no kind of, damn. No, nobody had that in chemistry where you take a substance and you put it in a liquid and you thin layer, yeah. Sometimes paper chromatography, because sometimes you can do the same thing on paper. But here's my point. One of the ways of analyzing drugs is by chromatography. Not the simple form that some of you may have done in the chemistry laboratory, but high pressure liquid chromatography or whatever the case may be. Yin is going to be doing all that kind of fancy stuff. Okay, our graduate student. But here's the thing: when just like with thin layer or paper chromatography, we got a time factor, and we got we just say peak height. I just say peak height. The peak height has to do. The peak height has to do with how much drug is in that sample. Okay. So let's say they took a urine sample from one of these professional athletes, or from a racehorse. They doping the horses too. Yeah, okay, no, the thoroughbreds and stuff. Okay, so when that urine, okay, is subjected to chromatography. This is just one method, chromatography. Then there's going to be a series of peaks, that come out. So, it might be something like that. It's been so long. But my point is, let's say that this peak right here is associated with the banned substance. That's banned. I shouldn't see that peak if that athlete didn't take it. When I inject the machine with that urine or blood sample, whatever the case may be. Well, you got smart trainers and doctors that serve on the team for these pro athletes. They can give another compound, okay, another, so that is legal, that comes out in the same place. That it elutes from the thin layer chromatography or the high pressure liquid term. It comes out in the same place, but it is a perfectly legal substance. But it comes out right in the same place the banned stuff. That's called masking. So now, the athlete is going to complain, hey, my athlete has asthma, and that's the atropine or whatever that they take for the asthma. It happens to come out at that same point. That's not a banned substance. So that's one thing that can happen. But a lot of times we might not be able to see the banned substance because of other biochemicals that the body is naturally producing. They might come out in the same place also. So, gotta remember the urine, everything is being concentrated in the urine, so not just, these different compounds, but naturally occurring chemicals, biochemicals or whatever in the body also, carbohydrate and protein breakdown products and all that stuff is coming out too,
Is there any other way? There's no other way to check for anything when they.
What you thinking about doing?
No.
No,
I'm just saying. Is there another way? Is there another test or whatever?
No, that's just one example. I mean, now they might not even be doing a whole lot. They got kits now. They got kits, they use antibodies and this kind of stuff, and so I'm sure that in some cases they're still doing this kind of stuff, but in other cases, this takes time and a whole bunch of money. Okay.
No, I'm saying. So you said masking, right? Mm-hmm. If somebody masks, I take an illegal drug and I mask it with something else. The kid is gonna pass that out and be like, oh, you taking an illegal drug now. I know I can see.
Well, see, different methods have their, whereas with the chromatographic method, I can more easily mask with a kit, because let's say if it's based on antibodies, associated with the banned substance or whatever the case may be. Well, it might discriminate to a greater extent than a method like this will. So just because the athlete or the racehorse or whatever took a banned substance, don't mean it's going to be hidden or masked by every technique. But the thing is, the trainers and the physicians know the techniques, the methods that are being used also to look for the drugs. They already know what's going to be used. I mean, that has to be, pretty much publicized to them. So they know what method is going to be used to try to analyze for that banned substance. They already know that. It ain't no guessing game. So if they come up with a way to hide it, then a lot of times, I'm not saying all of them, but that's what happens a lot of times. There used to be a guy, if you're from Houston, if you kept up with sports, Carl Lewis. Carl Lewis was an Olympic champion, still has some records, I think, right from the University of Houston. The world's fastest human in the 100 meter or whatever. But every time he ran up against Ben Johnson from Canada, Ben Johnson spanked that butt. And Carl Lewis kept saying, this guy's on steroids, and Ben Johnson kept on denying it. But eventually they did find out that Ben Johnson, the guy from Canada, was actually on steroids. But a lot of that, I'm just saying all that to say that a lot of that testing is based on urinary excretion of the drug. They're not trying to generate a curve like this or like this, but they're just trying to see is that banned substance even present. This can sometimes hide that substance from. And it's easier to mask in the urine because everything is so concentrated, so bunched up together. So. Okay, so urinary excretion. I wanted to get out of here early today. Let me see if anything else I need to cover there. Okay, in your textbook, I want to talk about two more methods, and hopefully they'll be quick and dirty, that's used to assess bioavailability. The third one, I'm going to give you the name that's in your textbook, and I'm going to give you the name that I have in my notes. So in your textbook, it's called in vivo pharmacodynamic comparison. So this would be the third method. I don't know if I'm racing with the right side. In vivo pharmacodynamic comparison. So a third method is in vivo. In vivo means inside of a living body. You know that, right? Inside a living system, okay? In vivo pharmacodynamic comparison. That's what the textbook calls it. Comparison. In my notes, I have, I'm gonna say IE. Acute pharmacologic effect. Pharmacologic. So I don't know, we used to talk about monitoring an acute pharmacological effect, but in this textbook, that same effect is referred to as in vivo, so it's done inside a living body. Okay. Pharmacodynamic, that's PD, yeah, pharmacodynamic comparison. So with this type of method, it doesn't come as, it's not as commonly used as methods 1 and 2, and it certainly is not as reliable. But if we don't have a way of easily measuring the drug in the plasma or the urine, then oftentimes we can look at an acute pharmacological effect or do a comparison with a pharmacodynamic effect. When we're using acute pharmacological effect or doing a PD pharmacodynamic comparison, basically all we're looking at is an acute means fairly rapid, right? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at an acute effect, pharmacological and acute pharmacodynamic effect of that drug product. So it might be something like, looking at changes in the pupil diameter. Some drugs, what is it? A drug like atropine, don't they affect the pupil? Atropine.
Yes.
Yeah, what is it? Does it make it larger or smaller?
No.
The diameter. Come on, y'all putting all this kind of stuff. I thought atropine was, isn't that an anticholinergic or cholinergic? Doesn't that affect pupil diameter? Huh? Doesn't it affect the size,
Yeah.
But y'all acting like I'm asking current questions here. Okay, but that's a type of acute pharmacological effect. Okay. We might be a change in the heart rate. Some drug products will affect, the heart rate. It might slow, not atropine necessarily. Okay, so an acute effect might be a change, something like a change in heart rate, a change in pupil diameter, blood pressure. Some drugs will change the blood pressure. Now this acute pharmacological effect, it doesn't have to be the therapeutic effect for which we're administering the drug product. In other words, we have drugs that change the diameter of the pupil, but we're not giving the drug for that effect. It could be for a totally different effect. We have drugs that affect the blood pressure, but they're not necessarily classified as antihypertensive. You follow what I'm saying? But this is one of the pharmacological effects of the drug. So I know you guys are pharmacology experts or whatever the case may be. So you got this list of therapeutic effects for drugs, and then you have side effects or adverse effects, right? So all of those are pharmacological effects. The drug that I'm thinking about getting to put some hair back here. What's that? What's that? Minoxidil? Rogaine? That's the trade name, right? Rogaine? But y'all don't laugh. I'm very sensitive about this,
As soon as you point, I didn't even notice it until you pointed that out.
I did, but you can put some castor oil.
I can put some castor oil on there.
Jamaican castor oil.
Okay, I got that might be what's important. I just heard that I could put some Jamaican castor oil on it.
Gross.
So it'll probably grow my hair, but I'll probably spend an inordinate amount of time in the bathroom, right?
No, you just put drops in the morning.
You sure that stuff is not absorbed?
You just rub it in.
Okay, well I'm gonna think about it. But in all
Said the miracle.
all right. Well, I was looking at the commercial, the guy said, I'm not only, an owner, I'm the user. So I'm like, hey, he sounds convincing. I'm like, okay, but seriously, minoxidil, what's that, an antihypertensive? I mean, it's something to do with the cardiovascular system. When it originally came on the market, and then physicians started seeing that the patients were reporting that hair was growing. Minoxidil, Rogaine, initially it didn't come on the market to grow hair. That was a side effect. That was a side effect of minoxidil. And then somebody decided, hey, I can cash in on that side effect. Now, of course, that I'm just talking about side effects and adverse effects. That wouldn't be an acute pharmacological effect because it takes a while for hair to grow. So acute pharmacological effects are things like I said, changes in pupil diameter, changes in blood pressure, and that kind of stuff. Those happen fairly immediately after you take the drug. Okay. So in the case of something like Rogaine, that wouldn't be an acute effect, but I'm just trying to let you see that, now it's used therapeutically to grow hair, but initially, the intent was not for Rogaine or minoxidil to grow hair. It was something else to do, I think, with the cardiovascular system. I don't know if it was for blood pressure or whatever the case may be. Growing hair growth was a side effect. So,
Same thing, Viagra.
yeah. Okay,
No, it was used, it's
Yeah,
used
it's
for the
a
heart, but you know that's a side effect.
Oh, okay.
It was intentional for that.
I didn't know that.
so think about this for a moment. So if we're looking at an acute pharmacological effect or a pharmacodynamic comparison, okay, we can do that. Let's just say, for instance, we wanted to look at blood pressure. We're testing two drug products and an acute pharmacological effect. Whether it's the therapeutic effect or not, it changes the blood pressure. Okay. So if I'm looking at blood pressure as a function of time, okay, we just say two drug product A and drug product B. Okay. Let's say this is a linear graph. Okay. So for one drug product, we administer the drug product. Okay. Let's just say they're anti-hypertensive. Okay. So we start at some baseline value. Blood pressure is going to go down, and then that's not going to last forever. If it's just one dose, wake up, John, and then it's going to start coming back up. All right, but we just call that drug product A. Now, I don't want you to mess up a nice T-shirt, man. No, don't hit the brother, man. Don't hit the brother, you know. But I mean, you already got a little bit of liquid on your T-shirt, man.
That boy got drugs today.
Okay. Yeah. Well, hey, I'm proud of that, man. I'll be officially. Well, I'm already a senior citizen, so keep listening. Huh?
Senior citizen. Oh, senior citizen.
No, he did not.
No, I'll be 66 this month, though, so I'll be a little bit.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so
Come on.
so that little bit of, little bit of loss, I just,
Wait, say it.
do some,
A Scorpio.
do some, spray some stuff on there. Okay, back on serious. So let's just say this was the case, okay? And then we gave another. We're comparing it. We want to compare it to drug product B, okay? When we give drug product B, okay, it's going to do something also, okay? And then eventually it's going to start, coming back up to. I don't want to do it right there. It's going to come back up to the place where we started. What I'm trying to show is that, if we start out with this blood pressure, then if I just give a single dose, we just say this is drug product B. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you, which one of these drug products is getting into the bloodstream faster, based on that pharmacodynamic comparison? Which one is getting in the bloodstream faster?
B.
I would say B, exactly right. Yeah. It's getting, we come to that conclusion because these are anti-hypertensive agents, but drug product B, okay, is lowering the blood pressure, faster than drug product A. So that would tell us that, drug product B is probably reaching the bloodstream faster than drug product A, okay? We could do something similar to what we do with plasma data, and look at areas under those curves, which I'm not going to have you do any math with this kind of stuff. I just want you to understand some concepts. So you just convince me that you understood one, for those that recognize that drug product B is getting into the bloodstream faster. Huh? Yeah, it's lowering the blood pressure faster than drug product A. So we conclude that if it's doing it faster, that means it must be getting into the bloodstream faster in order to do that. Now, in order to make some valid conclusions about this type of study, we also have to ensure that there is a valid dose-response curve. Now, in pharmacology, you should have talked about dose-response curve when you look at something like, for the drugs that we're testing here. Okay, we need to make sure that in this case, we're looking at lowering blood pressure. Okay, we need to make sure that in this case, that blood pressure, that we can correlate it back to a certain dose and/or concentration. We need, in other words, in our dose response curve, response. In this case, the response is blood pressure. But just in general, we're looking at a dose and a response. So I think that curve, I remember correctly, is called sigmoidal, where you got something like this. You've seen that shape of a curve before, right? Isn't that called sigmoidal? You haven't seen that before?
Yes, we have.
Yes, we have.
Okay, I mean, I might not be doing it exactly right, but usually we want to be on this, in this portion of the curve, because here, when we're on the steep portion of the curve, we can easily see a change in response relative to the dose. Of course, the bigger the dose is, the higher the concentration is going to be. We don't want to do our studies down in this region where it's almost flat up here, because we could come to the wrong conclusion or whatever. We might not be able to see this type of effect. In other words, A and B might look pretty much exactly the same up here or way down here, you know, because we're not getting much of a change in the response relative to the dose we're giving. So we want to work in this steep portion of the curve, okay? So if there is a difference in response, it would be more readily seen. Does that make sense what I'm saying? These same drugs, just different drug products. So we're given a dose that's related to a decrease in blood pressure that's down here, or a dose that's related to changes up here, it's going to be harder for us to see any differences. Whereas if we give the dose and we're in this region for both drug products, it's going to be easier to see a difference. A dose down here might lead down here, up here might lead us to conclude that there is no difference between A and B. So we want to make sure that we have a dose response, a valid dose response relationship for whatever drug products we're looking at. So we're going to do a pharmacologic effect study or an acute pharmacodynamic comparison. And I hope you can see this is a comparison. That's why in your textbook they call it a comparison. Pharmacodynamics, I don't have a fancy definition for that. I gave you a definition for pharmacodynamics. Some people just equate pharmacodynamics and pharmacology as the same thing, but this is actually pharmacodynamics. Dynamic implying that, suggesting that something is moving. So see, this blood pressure is moving as a function of time, just like pharmacokinetics. You know, it talks about the movement of drugs. Pharmacodynamics, you know, if we're just looking at the blood pressure at a given point, you know, then that would just maybe be considered strictly pharmacology. So when you hear the term pharmacodynamics, think in terms of the changes in the pharmacological response as it relates to time. Pharmacodynamics. Okay. So maybe that's why they went to this pharmacodynamic comparison as opposed to the old terminology, pharmacologic effect. Pharmacodynamics is just changes in pharmacology with respect to time. So this is truly pharmacodynamics. But you might hear me mention either one of these, okay? And if I say either one, if you read, you know, we're talking about the same thing, okay? Okay, let me see here. And then the last one that I want to mention, I'll tell you what, I'll just save it for another day. I'll save it for Friday, we'll wrap this up. In your textbook, it's referred to, this is on page 479, that pharmacodynamic stuff is on page 478. On page 479, they talk about a clinical endpoint study. Clinical endpoint study. And I'm gonna say IE. Clinical, sometimes it's referred to the clinical outcome study. So remind me on Friday, this is where I'm gonna pick up at. Sometimes it's called a therapeutic outcome study. Therapeutic outcome study. Okay. So all of these mean the same thing, but in the textbook, if you wanna read about these textbooks. And this is what's in the textbook here. That's the name of it. Clinical endpoint study. So I'll take up right there on Friday. I think we can finish up bioavailability and bioequivalence on Friday. The other major topic I want to talk about under this bioavailability and bioequivalence is just talk a little bit about how the study is designed. You know, the fact that they're using volunteers in a lot of these studies, the volunteers get paid and all this kind of fancy stuff. Questions? Any questions? Okay, I'll see some of you all this afternoon, the rest I'll see on Friday. Have a good one.
Thank you, sir.
When are you gonna have that stuff